are you successful? And more importantly, how do you actually define success? Because it can be different for different people. In this week's podcast, we're talking about success versus failure. Why is failure so scary? Why are we so afraid of failure? And how do we actually be successful in music as well as in life? My name's Pete Johns. This is Studio Live Today. My goal around here is to help you create, record and release your best music. We do that through tips and tricks and tutorial videos and this weekly podcast. If you want to check out all of the information, studiolivetoday.com is the place to go. And if you want to listen in on the audio version of this very show, you can do that. Just search for Studio Live Today on your podcatcher of choice, or you can go to studiolivetoday.com/podcast. So let's first start by defining success, because it is one of those things to say, am I a successful musician? What does a successful musician even mean? And it can get right down to, what is a professional musician? Well, the actual technical definition is a professional musician is anyone who is paid money for their music. So guess what? If you've released a single with DistroKid or with another distributor and then you've made 1 cent, you're a professional musician. But that's probably not what you're thinking of. None of us were thinking a successful music career is someone streaming our song one time and getting paid a couple of cents. I'm pretty sure of it anyway. Or maybe it is. And there's a little bit of a hint there. There's a little bit of a hack and a little bit of insight into what we're going to be talking about today. Because I think the number one thing that I talk about when people say, oh, how do you know? How do I be a success? How do I be a successful musician? Or how am I successful in my career, in my family, with my friends, with my life? And it's very different for different people. I actually asked my wife this question yesterday and I said, what does success mean? How do you know if you're successful or not? And she said, well, it depends who you are and it depends what you're going through in your life. Like if you're unwell, success to you might be getting over whatever illness you have. If you're having challenges with depression and anxiety, trying to work through those and come out the other side could be success for you. There's an old adage that says, money is not important. Happiness is important. Money is not important unless you don't have any money, in which case it's very, very different for you. And it can actually be difficult. I'm not saying that money just solves all your problems, but it does sort of help provide that baseline. If you're living below the poverty line, it's going to be hard to be happy, and therefore it's going to be hard to feel successful. So there's a lot of things we're throwing around here. So I thought I would go through a few statements based on my conversations from folks recently and really just refine and define down onto success and failure and why failure is actually sometimes important, but it's how we label it and it's what we do with it. So as I mentioned before, what is a professional musician and what is a successful musician? Well, it really depends. If you're like me, you probably get a lot of joy out of just creating music. The creation, it's like when you're on a road trip. The journey is just as important, if not sometimes more important than the end result. So for you, your feeling of success might be finishing a song. And this is something I hear from a lot of people. They say, because my mantra around here is create, record, release. And that release part, so many folks have 50%, 70%, 99% finished songs, but they're not finishing them, they're not sharing them, they're not quote-unquote releasing them. And again, releasing doesn't need to mean releasing to Spotify. You can do it, you can use DistroKid, they're a sponsor of the channel. You can use DistroKid, you can use another distributor and get your music out there and have it on Spotify and Apple Music and all the places. Or you don't have to. You can actually choose to just share it with a friend or share it with your family or just leave it for yourself. Look, I get in trouble for this because I don't recommend not sharing your music with someone else. There's an old adage that says art is only art once it's shared, and if you keep it to yourself, it's not art. Look, I don't believe at that level, because I think if you're just doing it for yourself, that's okay, and you can do that, and that's totally acceptable. But yeah, it is a good thing to be able to share your music. And for a lot of folks, that's what they deem as success, just finishing, just getting over the finish line. It's like running a marathon, right? Not many people are trying to run the fastest marathon ever. For some folks, just training to the point where you can run a half marathon and then run a full marathon is that's it. Just getting over that finish line. So finishing a song could be your definition of success. Finishing an EP or an album or multiple songs could be success. Collaborating with other musicians could be something that you're really keen to do, and that could be your success point. So there really are a lot of things, and unfortunately, as you've probably seen from a lot of rock stars and a lot of successful, quote unquote, successful musicians, it doesn't really lead to the perfect lifestyle and the perfect things that a lot of folks are thinking of. So if you're thinking in terms of success and the successful folks who have released a lot of music and made millions of dollars or won Grammy Awards or whatever your measure of it is, yeah, it can be difficult because as soon as you reach that plateau and that echelon, what do a lot of these folks do? Well, they go, okay, now what's next? And that's the thing. When you define success by a finite end goal, once you reach that goal, it can be actually super empty, like the marathon runner. Once you've crossed that finish line, what do you do then? Where to next if that was your goal? So yeah, a lot of people will then go, well, I'll run it faster, or if I sell 1 million copies of a song, I want to sell 2 million copies of a song. You can tell I'm an old man because I talk about selling songs, streaming songs, getting followers, whatever it is. Again, that's another thing. The vanity metrics of success are something that troubles me a great deal, especially in the music world. So a lot of folks deem their success based on their followers. So how many people are following you on Instagram? How many subscribers do you have on YouTube? How many streams do you have on Spotify? Well, these are all vanity metrics. They don't actually mean a heap, especially when, which is unfortunately happening these days, a lot of people are engineering their success through the manipulation of those sort of things. So if you've ever been online, and I know you have, you would have seen things like stream teams where you get together with your friends and you all stream each other's music to get a bunch of streams, or services that you pay, instantly get 1,000 Instagram followers, instantly get 10,000 streams on Spotify. Just pay us $20, $50, $100. Those things don't work for starters, so please stay away from them. Don't use them at all. See, I'm getting all choked up about this. Don't use those things. They don't work. They are breaching the terms of service of things like Spotify and Apple Music anyway, and they're usually run by people that are trying to scam you out of your money. And they do this by using bots and by using very low-paid workers in developing countries. It's not a good thing. You will get caught eventually. It's not super lucrative anyway, so just don't do it. But the main reason that people do that is that they've looked at what successful people look like and they're trying to emulate that. They're trying to be successful, so they're thinking, okay, well, if I get 100,000 subscribers, or if I get 100,000 streams on my song, I am going to be a success. But it doesn't really work that way. Like the analog version of that would be putting your CD out in the shops and then you go and buy all the copies, just so that it looks like, and look, that has been done. In fact, there's reports. If you go online, you can find out things like the New York Times bestsellers and things like the Billboard charts back in the day. Yeah, record companies were engineering things like that. There were stories of warehouses full of records that they bought to make the song look popular. And then look, it can drive popularity after that. People thinking, well, as soon as I get all those followers, then people will look at me and think that I'm successful. But guess what? Yeah, they'll scratch the surface and realize that maybe you should have spent more time working on your music and less time worrying about generating vanity metrics. Anyway, so yeah, success can be the numbers. It can be a numbers game. And is there anything inherently wrong with that? If you want to increase your subscriber count, if you want to increase your stream count, not really. But is it success, and are you going to be happy once you've achieved that? Or is it going to leave you feeling? Is it like when you'd play board games with your dad or your mum or your family back in the day, and they'd let you win, and then you'd realise this, and you're like, no, don't let me win. It's the victory feels hollow when you win. Or if you cheat at something and then you win, you're like, yeah, I won, and then you're like, yeah, but for what? Why? This doesn't feel good. So yeah, don't cheat, and be careful of how you define success. So the good news here. That all might sound a little bit doom and gloom, but the good news about all of this is that because success is subjective, you and only you get to define what success means for you. So for me, for instance, I consider myself a successful music educator. So I have a YouTube channel, and again, yes, I have the vanity metric of having over 100,000 subscribers, but more than that, I actually measure myself based on the effort. My success is that week in, week out, I release videos. So I've averaged 7 videos per week for the last 3 years, and for the majority of the time I've been on YouTube. So that means that I'm putting in the effort. And I think when you're looking at measures, and when you're looking at measures of success, it's the same with your music. It's more about, what's the old Gretzky quote? The Wayne Gretzky ice hockey player, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So the thing with music, And the same with the videos that I put out here. Are all of them going to be absolute bangers in terms of videos or in terms of songs? No. I've made some absolute potatoes of videos and I've made some potato songs. I just made one in an hour, which I'm actually pretty proud of, but some people might think, oh, geez, you can really tell you put an hour's effort into this one, Johns. But again, it might be that flash in the pan that is the one video that I made that I thought was going to be nothing, which is here's how to clean. I know I've talked about this before. Here's how to clean out your headphone jack with a toothpick. Yeah, 1,000,000+ views. Did I think that at the time? No, but because I took the shot, because I put the video out there and went, hey, who knows what'll happen with this, it did go well. But a lot of the time, it won't, and that's okay too. And it's the same with music, and it's the same with a lot of things in life, which brings us around to the fact that the flip side of success is failure. Oh, what a four-letter word failure is. Failure is not a bad thing. In fact, there's a lot of people have embraced this of like fail fast, fail harder, fail quick and often, and then pivot and then learn from it and then do something different. And yeah, I 100% agree with that because it is Gary Vaynerchuk, who I agree with some things that Gary Vee says and some things I don't. Go look him up if you don't know who Gary Vee is. But Gary Vaynerchuk says micro failure, macro success. And that's kind of how I define things. So for me, if I put out 300 videos in a year, if 10 of those are absolute bangers, that's great. I figure that that's a success. Whereas, yeah, if I only put out 10 videos a year, there's a lot of pressure on those 10 videos all being good. So, and look, a lot of people will talk, well, are you saying that quantity over quality is the way to go? I kind of am. And the reason I say that is that you're not going to get better until you start doing the thing. And another thing that Gary says is you don't get fit by reading about push-ups. You have to do push-ups. You have to do the reps. You have to put in the work in order to be able to actually get the results. And that's why, for as long as I've been doing this as my job, I've been measuring my success not on the end results that are out of my control. The algorithms, what YouTube decides to do, how many impressions that they're giving my videos out there, how many people are liking and commenting and subscribing. Those things are all great. Those things are all fine. But they are end results, and I don't have control over that. What I do have control over is the quantity and the quality of the videos I'm putting out. So what can I do? For me, it's about listening to the community. It's about hearing what people are asking about, what people are struggling with, and because my job is to help folks create, record, and release their best music, every time I put out a video, I have to ask myself one question. Is this going to help or inspire folks to create, record, and release their best music? If the answer is no, then don't do it. If the answer is yes, then do it and double down on it and do it fast. And don't worry so much if some things fail. I've had shows that I've done, live shows that I've done for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I've tried and tried and tried. I've tweaked the format and it just wasn't working. So I've replaced them, or I've removed them, or I've done something new. Your Music Live is a show on this channel that I really didn't think much of when I first started doing it because I wasn't sure how it would resonate. Turns out, resonates really well with a lot of folks. And that's cool. And that's for now. But in 2 years' time, if Your Music Live isn't resonating and the format needs to be tweaked or changed, or it needs to be completely replaced with a different thing, then I'll do that as well. And again, bringing it back to music, it's the same with your music. It's the same with what you're doing with your music. If you can measure your output by what you're actually doing, that's the best thing to do. So if you are someone who only has an hour or 2 hours a week to put into your music creation, really focusing on using that time wisely to actually create music. And again, if you are looking to set up your goals for the year, and I don't know, some people love goals, some people don't. If you want to have a goal for the year, maybe it is that you complete end-to-end 6 songs in 2023 or whatever year it is in the future. So if you can actually do that, instead of saying, I want to get a song that gets at least 10,000 streams, again, you don't control that. The only way you can control that is by doing all the things I told you not to do, such as purchasing streams, such as using stream teams and things that don't actually count. So, yes, measure your results. My advice is, anyway, is to measure results based on your effort and what you're actually doing. And that's a really good way to feel successful. Again, yeah, you can say, I want to get a 6-pack abs by the end of summer. That's great. But what if you don't? Well, guess what? If you put in the effort, you're going to be closer, aren't you? I want to lose 20 kilograms. I kind of do. I want to lose 20 kilograms in the next 6 months. Yeah, great. But if you don't get it, well, you've lost 15 kilograms. That's still pretty good. If you lost 2 kilograms, it's more than zero, isn't it? And it's the same with music. If you've created anything, if you've done anything that's more than nothing, you're on your way. And I know some people will say, I'm a high achiever, I'm a goal setter, Johns, and I need more than that. That's great. Go for more than that. But another person I like and a thought leader and author is Simon Sinek. And he's got a book called The Infinite Game. And he talks about the fact that there's finite games and infinite games. Finite games are like your sports. They're like your football, your baseball, your hockey, where there's a set rules, set players, set amount of time. And at the end, it's win, lose, or tie. That's all that happens. So that's a finite game. Whereas things like your music and things like life are infinite. You might be saying, I don't have infinite life, Pete. There's no pool of longevity that I can go to. But you really do, because especially through music, there's music. There's people that are influencing people with their music long after they've passed on from this mortal world. So yeah, it is an infinite game when it comes to your music, and especially by definition that this one song, this one EP, this one album, this 1 year's worth of work doesn't have to define you. And if it's a complete failure, if it falls in a hole, guess what? You've probably learnt from it. Which brings me to the next thing I wanted to talk about. When you are an expert in something, so when you are successful and you consider yourself an expert, I see and hear this around the music industry, and I see and hear this around a lot of things, where a lot of people are like, I've got 30 years experience. I'm an expert when it comes to this bit of software or mixing music or mastering. I'm a multi-award winning, Grammy award winning expert in this field. Yeah, that's great. And maybe you are. And maybe that's how you define yourself. And maybe it's just what you need for your own ego. All cool. But the thing is, when you're an expert, you've also got to be a student. And I actually think it's more important to continually learn, to continue to be a student so that you are continuing to learn, because the questions that we ask, to say I'm successful and then draw a line in the sand and say, right, I've crossed that line. Again, it's that finite game thing. If you reach the point where you're like, okay, now I know everything and now I can continue on. For me, GarageBand iOS is something that I have tried over the last 7 years since I started learning GarageBand to learn everything. But I'm still caught out by weird little things that I didn't know I could do, or weird little things that other people tell me about. And that's cool. I love that more than the feeling of superiority that I could have if I chose to say, I know more than most people about this thing. I'm in the top 1% of knowledge of GarageBand. I don't care. Like, that's not kind of how I'm wired, but I know some people might be. But B, I think as soon as I sort of go down that track, I'm missing out. I'm missing out on new things that I can learn. And it's the same thing about music. Every week that I listen to other folks' music, it's adding to my influence. And every book I read, every song I listen to, every conversation I have, I'm not consciously taking away other bits and pieces that I might be using, but even subconsciously. So you listening to this podcast or watching this video right now, you might walk away from this and not really think about anything. Except that then you're going to be sitting there in 2 weeks' time creating some music and feeling unsuccessful and go, remember what John said? Remember how he said that if I just put in the effort and put in the reps and get the songs out there, I'll improve? Yeah, well, maybe I just get this one done and just shove it out there. And then you do, and you release that song. And then a whole bunch of people give you feedback. Some of it great, some saying, wow, I really love that bass line. Others saying, the drums just didn't work for me. Here's what I think you could do next time. And then you learn, and then you grow. So being a student of whatever it is you're working on, I think is so important. And I think as soon as you stop learning, you stop growing. I know it sounds all woo-woo and cliched, but a lot of it is about mindset. And a lot of success and failure is about mindset. Why do you think there are psychologists and sports coaches and people that are teaching people that are running how to visualize things, and it's working? Like it's a lot of the most successful people is because of their mindset. Yes, you can have natural talent. Yes, you can put in your 10,000 hours and become really good at something, but your mindset can make all the difference, as you probably know. And again, I've talked about this before, but just your approach to things, like fear and anxiety and excitement, all generate the same things: the butterflies in the stomach, the heart rate, the sweaty palms. So for those of us that have suffered from anxiety, you realize, well, some folks, some of the treatments and some things that you talk about are the fact that if you can reframe that in your brain as excitement, as instead of I'm anxious, I'm thinking about, just think, wow, my brain is really doing something interesting right now. Let's think about this. Let's not enjoy, but let's analyze and work out what's going on here. And as soon as you have that awareness and that switch, that switch, really fun, really different. And the same with things like flying. I think Simon Sinek talked about the fact that he used to not like flying at all until he realized that the feelings of fear and anxiety that he had for flying were the same as excitement. So instead of saying, I have to go on a plane, he changed that to, I get to go on a plane. I get to fly in the sky on this amazing piece of technology that's safer than getting in a car, that's safer than walking across the road, that's definitely safer than riding a motorbike or a lot of other things that many people do on the daily. So, yeah, reframing things in terms of your fears. And the same with failure. Reframing failure, the reason I went down this whole learning and student path with this conversation is that learning that failure is really just learning what doesn't work, and it can be as important, if not more important, than what does work. I'll say that again because it's a really important concept that I think it can be tough to get your head around at first. Failure is so important because it is just as important, if not more important, to know what's not working for you in music, in relationships, in life, as to what is working. So if you're creating, recording and releasing your music, you're getting the opportunity to have feedback and to learn and to grow from that. Meaning that every time you put out a song, for me, I've always used this example because when I used to mix my songs early on, I would make my vocals way too loud. And there was a wonderful guy called Leif Bjork out of Sweden, I believe. Leif, sorry if I've got your country of origin wrong. Scandinavian dude, Leif Bjork. And he said to me, Pete, your vocals are too loud. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, let me have a listen and let me have a look at this. And of course, your first reaction, everyone's natural first reaction is to be a bit defensive and go, oh, no, look, that's just the way vocals are mixed these days. And yeah, in pop music in the 2020s, yeah, everyone wants everything really crushed and lots of compression and blah, blah, blah. But no, I listened back and went, you're right, Leif, they are too loud. And I turned them down 2 dB and it sounded much better. So I think there's probably something that you're doing right now or that you don't know, that just by being a student, just by accepting that sometimes you'll have these micro failures, it's actually going to make your macro success so much better and so much sweeter. So be a student, even if you're an expert. Vulnerability. Yeah, being vulnerable. Unfortunately, success and failure, the folks that are going to do better in life and have better relationships and be better role models and sit on their deathbed feeling good about the effect they've had on the world are usually vulnerable people. Because people who either mask, because here's the thing, we are all vulnerable. We all have vulnerability. The difference is some people accept it and some people mask it. So who's masking their vulnerability? Well, sociopaths at the highest level. In fact, some sociopaths are so sociopathic that they have no vulnerability at all. And that's people that's your serial killer level and politicians. So anyone at that. And yes, I do bundle serial killers and politicians because both of them have very big egos and little to no care about their impact on other people. And not all serial killers are that bad. No, sorry. I was about to go down the not all politicians are that bad. I threw in a little joke there. Let's get off the delightful topic of serial killers and come back to vulnerability. So the key thing to think about here is that your vulnerability is a strength and not a weakness. A lot of people flip this around. A lot of people get this up on its head. And unfortunately, I've been watching a lot of Ted Lasso lately, where my wife and I are re-watching season 3 right now. And that show is all about why the toxic male masculinity and mental health, the stigma attached to mental health, are damaging. And you see throughout the 3 seasons of the show how they go from an environment that's super toxic, that's causing a lot of issues for a lot of people, to how that's all resolved. And each and every one of the characters in that show, and yes, it's a fictional show, I get it, but each and every one of the characters in that show vulnerability. And it's not until they show their vulnerability or stop masking the vulnerability they already have that they actually are, quote unquote, successful. So why is this relevant? Well, it's because a lot of us think of vulnerability as weakness, asking for help. That's a weakness. Like, did you ever do that in school? I used to hate asking for help in school. I used to think I was failing because I'm like, the teacher's busy. They look pissed off. If I ask a question, what if it's a dumb question? What if the class laughs at me because I asked this question because everyone else understood it? All 29 other kids understood it, and I was the only dumbass that didn't get it. These are all the things that make us mask our vulnerability from a very young age. So one of the things that I've done with this channel, with Studio Live Today, with the conversations I have with people, with the support that I give folks, is to reinforce the fact that there are, I know it's a cliche, but there are no stupid questions. There is nothing so basic or so simple. And it's better than that. If you are thinking it and asking it, there is a 99.9% chance that someone else is too. And the reason that the most success that I've had on this channel has been listening to the feedback, looking at the comments, listening to the questions that folks have, and then making a video for those things. And the very fact that my most popular video is, hey, you know what? When your headphone jack won't work, it's usually because your phone's been in your pocket and you've got a bit of pocket lint in there. Grab a toothpick, dig it out, you're golden. That to me was a very simple thing that I'd been doing for years, just intuitively going, well, if it's not plugging in, the connections, there's something wrong with those connections. I need to clean out that socket. But other people weren't thinking that. 1 million plus other people in the last few years weren't thinking that because they watched that video. And many of them have said, wow, this is great. I can't believe how simple it was. I never would have thought of that. So if you got questions, if you want to find out information, ask the questions. The only people that will belittle you for asking those questions are not worth hanging out with anyway. They're not the sort of people that are going to help you. They're the sort of people that are the experts, that are not the students, that are not the lifelong learners, the people that use their knowledge and their superiority to push other people down, to look down on other people, to make other people feel like failures, to make them feel like a bigger success. Because if you think about it, there's two ways to be successful. Like, let's say you want to build the tallest building, right? Okay, so you're in a city and you want to have the tallest building. Your name is Ronald Crump and you want to have the tallest building because that's just the kind of guy you are. And the biggest building in this city is 40 stories. And you're like, oh, okay, I better build a 50-story building. Or, you know what you do? You build a 30-story building and then knock down all the other buildings that are above 30 stories. So there's two ways to be, quote unquote, the best or the biggest or the bravest. And that is to either just do your thing, just be good and then prove the results, the proof's in the pudding, or knock other people down so that you feel better. In Australia, we call it the tall poppy syndrome, that when someone gets too big for their boots, we're like, oh, geez, he's a bit of a tall poppy, isn't he? That Russell Crowe, he's a tall poppy. That Hugh Jackman, he's a tall poppy. We'll cut him down to size. He's got an ego on him, that one. So yeah, anytime someone is deemed too successful by our very strange standards, we want to cut them down. And again, that's just that mindset to say that. And it's just that we see this in music. To give you a metaphor for music, we see this with people that are experts. Like I said, anytime I see someone, if I see a post or if I see a comment or a reply to something that starts with how many years experience someone has, I know that I'm about to get a tongue lashing, an earful from someone about why I'm wrong on something. So I'll say, you can create great music using your iPhone in GarageBand. And some people might say, I respectfully disagree because I think that it's easier when you're using a mixing desk, or it's easier on a PC because you can use a control surface, or any number. That's the thing. There's plenty of legitimate reasons why you can rebuff my claim there. But the one thing that I don't think you can is to say, well, I've got 30 years experience in a professional studio and therefore I know you can't. That doesn't make any sense at all. There's not relationships directly between those two things. It's like saying, yeah, I've got 30 years experience throwing a ball, therefore you can't tell me how to play ice hockey. It's like, well, they're not the same. And they're not. They're similar. Yeah, you got to get a ball in a net or a puck in a net, but they're very different games. And it's the same thing between 30 years in an analog studio. Yeah, I respect it. I love it. It would be cool. But guess what we're not doing these days? We're not using big mixing desks. We're not using big outboard gear. We're not chopping up tape to do our cuts and our splits and our edits. Thank the good Lord. Thank your deity of choice for that one. Because back in the early days of tape, You wanted to do a split or a cut. You know, these days how you grab your split tool and you split it in a couple of places and you delete a bit and then you move a bit. That was literally a piece of tape back in the day. So you're like, oh, I just want to remove these 2 bars. Guess what? You got to find out exactly where those 2 bars start and end, and split it up and chop it back together. Not saying that's not a cool skill to have, but it's just not relevant. And even if it is relevant, there's better ways to answer that question. As I said, there's plenty of other things you could say. Or why not be a student? Why aren't these folks continuing to be students? Why? Well, a few reasons. They've built their success around what they've done in the past. It's why Blockbuster failed. It's why newspapers are failing. It's why old media is struggling so much. Because the people that built their success around the way things used to be done are not learning the new techniques. Or they're so stubborn, they're saying, no, we've tried new things and they didn't work. Well, guess what? There'll be new things. And you need to try those. You need to be open to new experiences and open to learning new things. So vulnerability, a strength, not a weakness. Ask questions. And then when you're seeking answers to questions, make sure you're doing it from someone who has some humility, who is also showing vulnerability. Being a good leader, being a good mentor, being a quote-unquote expert at things does not mean that you get to talk down to people. And anyone who does is masking their vulnerability. And any energy that's being spent masking vulnerability means that they're not putting all their energy into helping and building other people up. They're probably also putting energy into bringing people down and making them feel like more of a failure so that they can feel like more of a success. Couple more concepts here. Should you fake it till you make it? When we're talking about success and failure, the old job interview where it's like, tell me about yourself, and you talk yourself up and you say all these great things and you fake it till you make it. Imposter syndrome. Oh my God, I've got so much imposter syndrome, but I better fake it till I make it so that I can be successful. I need to show people that I'm successful. Yeah, there's a small problem with that, and that is the whole vulnerability thing. But it's also that you can get yourself into some trouble. Now, there's sort of 2 ways to look at this. We've talked about imposter syndrome before, and you can find, if you search my name, Pete Johns Imposter, I know it's fun to search for, then you can find out all about imposter syndrome. But basically, that's that feeling when you're starting to do something and you don't quite think you know what you're doing. Now, imposter syndrome's fine. It's only not fine if you feel it and then don't acknowledge it, or you don't do anything to about it. So for me right now, I feel imposter syndrome because I'm making videos about Logic Pro for iPad, and I'm not an expert, quote unquote expert, in Logic Pro for iPad. So I worry that Logic Pro Mac experts are going to come at me and say, you GarageBand boy, you don't know anything about FlexTime, you don't know anything about automation, you don't know about aux-sends. And they're right, I don't. And the difference is that I've accepted my vulnerability and I've led with it. And I've said, hey, you know what? You're right, but here's how I can help people. By learning and by understanding what it takes to learn to go from something like GarageBand to something like Logic, I might be better placed to help certain types of people that also don't know this stuff. So sometimes the best teachers are people who just learnt it, right? Yes, some people that have known it for years are great. But again, it's why Wayne Gretzky wasn't a great hockey coach. I mean, it's probably not the only reason why, but Wayne Gretzky was arguably the best hockey player in the world ever. And when he coached the Phoenix Coyotes, they were terrible. Why? Well, part of it might have been that he was so naturally talented, and it had been so many years since he had to actually struggle to do the basics, he probably wasn't great at helping younger players with the basics. And it's the same with this sort of thing. So back to the should you fake it till you make it. Well, there's a difference here. There's a difference between being too open too early. So interestingly, yeah, a little bit of not false bravado or not faking it, but people also don't want you to go, yep, got no idea about anything, and it's going to be all way too hard. It's the same with when you're opening up to people. Unfortunately, a lot of folks think of vulnerability as going on YouTube and having a rant, or going on Facebook and leaving a big post about how much you're struggling. And look, if that's what you choose to do, that's what you choose to do. But that's not really vulnerability. Vulnerability is actually talking to someone. It's actually reaching out to a friend that you know and trust and asking them for help. And it's the same sort of thing with this. If you're getting a new job, or if you're learning a new bit of software, or if you're starting in music, You don't have to say, "Oh man, I know nothing. I'm a complete failure. I'm terrible." Like, that don't have to be self-deprecating. You can still be confident, but still feel like you've got a lot of way to go and you've got a lot to learn. It's a bit like a first date. Like if you're going out on a first date with a hopeful potential significant other or partner, are you going to instantly lead with all your flaws? No, you might say, yeah, look, I like football, I like slow walks on the beach, and I like disco dancing. Because who doesn't like disco dancing? Are you going to say I'm actually kind of needy, probably eat and drink too much, and oh yeah, that gambling thing? Like, no, and obviously I went a bit extreme there for humour, but yeah, there's going to be things that you will reveal over time, and it's not that you're trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes or anything. If there's something serious that you want to reveal and that you need to talk about, by all means. But again, how many of us are going out there leading? Like, you don't do a job interview and you go, yeah, like my last job. Again, unfortunately, some people are too honest. And there's such a thing as, yes, you want to be honest. You want to tell the truth whenever you can. But there's some folks that are just too truthful. Like when you're going for a job, say you're trying to leave a job because it's toxic and the culture's not great. Do you tell that to a prospective new employer? No. Because why? Because they might think that you're the problem. You might not be. But why would you place that in their head? There's other ways around it where you cannot lie. You can just say, I'm looking for a new challenge, which is probably the truth. You don't even have to, you could say, I've heard great things about the culture that you have in this organization. I'd love to be a part of it. You don't have to say my last one was shit. Because that's just going to make them think, oh, well, maybe this person's the problem. And maybe they're going to do that to the culture of this business. So, yeah, you don't have to, you got to sit somewhere in between, in my opinion. And again, remember, I would like to preface every statement. You can go back in every statement I've made in my life, but especially in this podcast, put in my opinion and in my experience. Because your experience may vary. Your experience may be completely different. Your opinion may be completely different. And that's totally fine. You may love hanging out with pretentious wankers who talk down to you 24/7. I don't know why you would, but you might. Or maybe misery loves company and you love having giant plum parties, which is poor little old me parties with a bunch of other people because you're all going to talk about how bad things are and how downtrodden you are and what failures you are. I don't think that's great for your psyche and for your mental health and well-being, but maybe it's what you choose to do. And guess what? If you're a grown-ass adult and you're not bringing anyone else down that doesn't want to be, so as long as you're not affecting anyone else negatively, I always joke with my wife because there was a TV show called Big Brother. Unfortunately, I think it's trying to come back at the moment. But they used to have to vote people out, and there'd be this one phrase that they would use, which would be, "They're really negatively affecting my experience in the house." So whenever I talk with my wife about people who are bad or doing bad things, I go, yeah, they're just negatively affecting my experience in the house. And it's definitely never about my children. Oh, except what it is. All right. So, yeah, fake it till you make it, not always a good idea. Especially these days, because you know what? With the last 3 years, with everything that's gone on, the whole work-life balance thing and your success of your life and your success of your work, it used to be that those were all completely separate, right? Your work life was completely separate to your home life, which was separate to your social life. We don't really have that compartmentalization these days, especially with things like social media, especially with the fact that a lot of us are working from home and getting a lot of our social interactions at work. So you do have that crossover there, which means that to be successful, you kind of need to focus on all of those. It's really, really hard to feel really fulfilled and happy and successful at home while hating your job, hating your boss, and hating the commute to work, and hating the work you do, and hating your co-workers, etc., etc. Because there's got to be a crossover there at some point, and you're not gonna love it. All right, I wanted to finish off by talking about gratitude. And yes, we're going to get a bit woo-woo here for just a minute, and I apologize for that. But when you think about it, when you think about the grand scheme of things, success and failure, as I talked about right up front, the success for someone who's got some physical illness could be simply getting better. For someone that's going through depression, anxiety, just feeling normal, and again, using the air quotes for normal, is what your goal might be. Or again, if you just really hate your job, just getting a job that you can tolerate might be success. Just being able to go in somewhere for 8 hours a day that you don't despise, that could be your success. And that's totally cool, because what you need to look at is how lucky You are. And look, I know lucky is a bad word, but how much you have the ability to do, considering that for the vast majority of you, you're listening to this podcast or watching this video, which means you have some sort of internet connection. It means you have some sort of device. It means you have the desire and the free time. You are not enslaved where you can't watch this or listen to this. You hopefully don't have a government that's telling you that you can't watch or listen to this, which is not the same that can be said for everyone around the world and have the means to be able to do so. And you've got interest and you're part of a community, because guess what? If you're listening to this or watching this, you are part of the community. Or if you're not, let me invite you in. Welcome to the community, because that's one of the most important things for being successful is sharing in success. And again, with the whole finite versus infinite game thing, when folks are using words like win and best and better and defeat, I worked for a business for a while, and they'll remain nameless, but they had things called must-win battles. And it was always about crushing the competition and beating others and being the best and being number one. And it really taught me the wrong ways and the wrong behaviors and the wrong words to even use to visualize what I'm doing. Because me now as a musician and me now as a music educator, should I want to be number one and win and beat other people? No, because I'm a true believer in the fact that the high tide raises all the ships. So the fact that more people are creating music on their iPad and iPhone than ever before is great. That more people are using GarageBand than ever before is great. That there's more people creating video content about the same stuff that I'm doing is great. Is in the micro it going to take a few views away from me because someone else might make a similar video? Sure. But guess what? I've been making similar videos to other people, and other people, it's a flow-on effect. So there don't have to be. There is enough out there for everyone to do it. Just depends whether you have a finite or an infinite mentality, and whether you think about things in terms of abundance and win-win, or whether you think for every winner there's got to be a loser. It's why I don't like the stock market, and it's why I definitely don't like cryptocurrency, and why I definitely don't like multi-level marketing and pyramid schemes and the like. Because for someone to quote-unquote win, I'm doing a lot of quoting and unquoting today, there's got to be a loser. If you think about it in terms of speculative investment, which just means buying something in the hope that the value goes up and then selling it again. When that thing is just part of a company, or even worse, a made up bit of technology like a crypto coin, that's not actually adding any value. So in order for, if there's $1,000 worth of a thing and people buy it, and then the value of that thing goes up to $2,000 and they sell it, well, guess what? That $1,000 doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes out of the pockets of other people. So you don't have to. Things that are finite like that, where for there to be winners, there have to be losers, not great. The same way I don't like American Idol. For there to be winners, there have to be losers. Why can't they all just create, record, and release their best music and all be happy and all be successful? Well, not everyone can win, Johns. That's not how it works. Yes, you're right. That's not how sport works. That's not how finite games work. Why should things like your business, your life, your career, your music have to be a win-lose situation? Because guess what? That would generate a lot of losers, a lot more losers than winners, if that were the way that we looked at things like success with our music. So I know this was a long rant, but I hope that there was maybe one or two little tidbits that you might have been able to take away. And I would love to hear from you. You can always reach out to me. If you're watching the video version, there's a comment section down below. Would love to hear your comments on this. How do you define success? How do you deal with failure? Do you even think about this sort of stuff? Will you be thinking about it more now when it comes to your music? If you're listening to the podcast, you can always reach out to me. I'm available all the time via email, pete@studiolivetoday.com, or join all the communities. We've got some great communities, because I'm just one person, and I don't always have the time or the energy to respond to absolutely everything. Not because I don't want to, simply because I would, if I did, I would spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week answering individual inquiries. And I still love reading all the comments. I would rather be creating videos, creating podcasts, creating tips and tutorials based on the feedback and the comments and the questions that you send my way. So I wanted to thank you all for being here, for listening, for watching. And as we say at the end of each and every show around here on Studio Live today, please this week be kind to yourself, be kind to others, keep creating, and I hope you're successful. Bye for now.